The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones of Westminster Abbey as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her dressing-room mirror. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened the delicate pearl earrings that had belonged to Diana, Princess of Wales. Today would mark one of the most challenging days in royal history, though the public would never know the full depth of what was about to unfold. William paced the corridor outside their private chambers, his usually composed demeanor cracking under the weight of the secret they both carried. The decision had been months in the making, discussed in hushed whispers during late-night conversations when the children were fast asleep and the palace staff had retired for the evening. They had weighed every consequence, considered every alternative, but the conclusion remained the same. The breakfast table sat untouched as both Catherine and William found themselves unable to eat. George, Charlotte, and Louis chattered excitedly about their upcoming school events, completely unaware that their parents were about to make a choice that would forever alter the course of their lives. Catherine watched her children with a mixture of profound love and heartbreaking sorrow, memorizing every laugh, every gesture, every innocent smile. "Mummy, are you feeling all right?" Charlotte asked, her perceptive eyes catching the unusual quietness in her mother's behavior. Catherine forced a smile, one that had been perfected through years of royal duties, and gently brushed her daughter's hair away from her face. "Just thinking about some grown-up things, sweetheart," Catherine replied, her voice steady despite the emotional storm brewing within her heart. William caught her eye across the table, and in that silent exchange, they both acknowledged the magnitude of what lay ahead. The palace staff went about their daily routines, preparing for what they believed would be a standard day of royal engagements. The schedule showed a series of charitable visits, a meeting with Commonwealth representatives, and an evening reception for distinguished guests. None of them suspected that this carefully orchestrated day would serve as an elaborate farewell tour. As the morning progressed, William found himself standing in his father's former study, now transformed into his own private workspace, the weight of tradition pressed down upon him from every corner of the room. Portraits of generations of monarchs gazed down from the walls, their eyes seeming to question the unprecedented decision he was about to announce to the world. Catherine joined him in the study, closing the door behind her with deliberate care. They stood together in the silence, both understanding that once they stepped outside this room, there would be no turning back. The speech had been written and rewritten countless times, each draft attempting to capture the complexity of their emotions while maintaining the dignity befitting their positions. "The children," Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible. It was the same concern that had kept them awake for weeks, the thought that haunted every quiet moment. How do you explain to young minds that sometimes love requires sacrifice, that sometimes the greatest act of service is knowing when to step away? William took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that had comforted them through every challenge they had faced together. "They will understand someday," he said, though his voice carried the weight of uncertainty. "When they're older, when they can see the full picture of what we're trying to protect them from." The palace corridors seemed longer than usual as they made their way to the first engagement of the day. Staff members bowed respectfully, their faces showing nothing but the usual deference and professionalism. Catherine wondered how many of them would still look at her with the same respect once the truth was revealed. The thought sent a chill through her spine. But she maintained her composure with the grace that had defined her years as a working royal. Their first stop was a children's hospital, a place that had always held special meaning for both of them. As they walked through the brightly colored wards, interacting with young patients and their families, the irony was not lost on either of them. Here they were, bringing comfort and joy to other people's children while preparing to make a decision that would fundamentally change the lives of their own. Catherine knelt beside a 7-year-old girl who was recovering from surgery, listening intently as the child described her favorite toy and her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. The genuine connection, the pure innocence of the interaction, made Catherine's chest tighten with emotion. This was what she would miss most, these unguarded moments where royal protocol melted away and human connection took precedence. William watched his wife with admiration and heartbreak in equal measure. Her natural ability to connect with people, her genuine empathy, and her unwavering commitment to service had made her one of the most beloved figures in the modern royal family. The decision they were about to make would rob the world of her public presence, but he knew it was the only way to save what mattered most. The hospital visit concluded with a private moment in the chapel, where both Catherine and William found themselves offering silent prayers for strength and guidance. The afternoon sun filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the stone floor where they knelt together. In that sacred space, surrounded by centuries of faith and tradition, they found a moment of peace amidst the emotional turbulence. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Catherine turned back one last time to wave at the children and staff who had gathered to see them off. Her smile was radiant, her demeanor warm and engaging, giving no hint of the personal struggle she was enduring. The crowd responded with enthusiastic cheers and waves, completely unaware that they were witnessing one of her final public appearances in this capacity. The drive back to the palace was conducted in thoughtful silence, both William and Catherine lost in their own reflections. The familiar sights of London passed by the car windows, the bustling streets, the historic buildings, the people going about their daily lives. Soon, they would be just observers of this world, rather than central figures within it. Evening approached with the weight of inevitability. The children had been tucked into bed after their usual bedtime stories, their innocence providing a stark contrast to the adult complexities their parents were navigating. Catherine stood in the nursery doorway for longer than usual, watching her youngest sleep peacefully, wondering how different their world would look when he awakened. The final preparations began in earnest as trusted advisors arrived discreetly at the palace. Legal documents required signatures, security arrangements needed finalization, and communication strategies demanded last-minute adjustments. Every detail had to be perfect because there would be no opportunity to correct mistakes once the announcement was made public. William's phone buzzed with messages from his father, his brother, and other senior royals who had been informed of the decision only hours earlier. The conversations had been difficult, filled with arguments, pleas for reconsideration, and ultimately reluctant acceptance. The monarchy would survive this unprecedented step, but it would never be quite the same. As midnight approached, Catherine found herself standing on the palace balcony, looking out over the city that had been her home for over a decade. The lights twinkled like stars, each one representing lives and dreams and hopes that she had tried to touch through her royal duties. Tomorrow, her relationship with this city and its people would change forever, but tonight, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she was about to leave behind. Dawn broke over London with an unusual stillness, as if the city itself sensed that something monumental was about to unfold. Catherine woke before her alarm, her internal clock disrupted by the gravity of what this day would bring. William was already awake beside her, staring at the ceiling with the expression of a man carrying the world's weight on his shoulders. The children's breakfast routine proceeded as normal, their cheerful chatter filling the dining room with the kind of innocent joy that would soon become even more precious. George discussed his upcoming school project about space exploration, while Charlotte planned a tea party with her favorite dolls. Louis, ever the entertainer, made faces that sent his siblings into fits of giggles. Catherine and William exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing. How do you preserve this happiness while the world around them changes forever? The morning briefing with palace staff proceeded like any other day. Schedules were reviewed, logistics confirmed, and security protocols discussed. The private secretary went through the afternoon's final engagement, a visit to a youth center in South London, with meticulous attention to detail. None of the staff suspected that they were planning what would become a historic farewell tour. Catherine spent extra time getting ready, choosing her outfit with particular care. She selected a navy blue dress that had always been one of William's favorites, paired with the sapphire and diamond earrings that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth. Each choice carried meaning, each detail a silent tribute to the role she was about to leave behind. The mirror reflected a woman who looked every inch a future queen, making the irony of the day even more poignant. The car journey to South London became a mobile sanctuary where Catherine and William could speak freely without fear of being overheard. William reached for Catherine's hand as they crossed Westminster Bridge, the Thames flowing steadily below them like time itself. "Do you remember our first official engagement together?" he asked, his voice soft with nostalgia. Catherine smiled, the memory bringing warmth to her eyes. "The university in Scotland. I was terrified I would say something wrong or trip over my own feet." She squeezed his hand gently. "You told me to just be myself, that authenticity matters more than perfection." "It still does," William replied, his words carrying deeper meaning for this moment. "What we're doing today, it's about being authentic to who we really are, underneath all the titles and expectations." The youth center buzzed with excitement as they arrived. Young people aged 16 to 25 gathered in the main hall, their faces bright with anticipation. This organization focused on providing opportunities for disadvantaged youth, offering job training, mentorship, and emotional support. Catherine and William had chosen this venue carefully for their final engagement because it represented everything they believed about service, empowering others to build better futures. Catherine moved through the room with natural grace, listening to stories from young people who had transformed their lives through the center's programs. She met Maria, an 18-year-old who had overcome homelessness and was now studying to become a nurse. "I want to help people the way this place helped me," Maria explained, her eyes shining with determination. "That's exactly how change happens," Catherine replied, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "One person deciding to turn their experience into something that benefits others." As she spoke, Catherine realized she was describing her own journey in a way, taking personal struggle and transforming it into purposeful action. William engaged with a group of young men learning construction skills. James, a 20-year-old from a troubled background, showed William the carpentry project he had been working on, a beautifully crafted bookshelf destined for a local primary school. "Building something with your own hands changes how you see yourself," James explained, his pride evident in every word. "You're absolutely right," William agreed, running his fingers along the smooth wood surface. "There's something powerful about creating something that will outlast us, something that will benefit others long after we're gone." His words carried weight beyond the immediate conversation, reflecting his own thoughts about legacy and lasting impact. The afternoon session included a discussion about mental health, a topic both Catherine and William had championed throughout their royal careers. They sat in a circle with a dozen young people who shared their struggles with anxiety, depression, and trauma. The conversation was raw and honest, free from the usual formalities that characterized most royal interactions. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that the path you're on isn't working," Catherine said during the discussion. "It takes courage to change direction, even when everyone expects you to continue as you are." The young people nodded in agreement, unaware that their royal visitor was speaking from deeply personal experience. A young woman named Sarah spoke about her decision to leave university despite family pressure, choosing instead to pursue vocational training in a field she was passionate about. "Everyone thought I was throwing away my future," she said, "but I knew I had to follow my own path, not the one other people had mapped out for me." William leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "The hardest decisions are often the ones that disappoint people who care about us," he said quietly. "But living authentically sometimes requires disappointing others to save yourself and the people you love most." As the formal session concluded, Catherine found herself in an impromptu conversation with the center's director, a woman in her 50s who had dedicated her life to youth advocacy. "Your Royal Highness," the director said, "your support has meant everything to these young people. You've shown them that their stories matter, that their struggles are valid." Catherine felt tears threatening to gather in her eyes. "They've given me far more than I could ever give them," she replied honestly. "Working with people like this reminds me why service matters, why it's worth fighting for what's right, even when it's difficult." The final moments at the youth center took on special significance as Catherine and William prepared to leave. They lingered longer than usual, taking extra time to shake hands, offer encouragement, and exchange contact information with staff members. The young people gathered outside to wave goodbye, their faces radiant with inspiration and hope. As their car pulled away from the curb, both Catherine and William turned to watch the youth center disappear behind them. The young people continued waving until the car rounded the corner, their enthusiasm and optimism serving as a powerful reminder of why public service mattered so much. The drive back to the palace was filled with reflection. "They have no idea how much they've inspired me today," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "Listening to them talk about making brave choices, about disappointing others to stay true to themselves, it felt like they were giving us permission to do what we need to do." William nodded, his jaw tight with determination. "They're proof that people can change their circumstances when they have support and understanding. Maybe that's what we're doing. Modeling the idea that it's okay to choose a different path when the one you're on isn't sustainable." The palace came into view as afternoon faded into evening. The familiar sight of the guards, the tourists gathered outside the gates, and the journalists stationed at their posts created a surreal backdrop for what would soon become one of the most shocking announcements in royal history. Inside those walls, their children were completing homework, playing games, and living their lives in blissful ignorance of the storm that was about to break. Catherine's personal assistant met them at the entrance, carrying a thick folder containing the evening's correspondence. Letters from charities, invitations to events, requests for patronage. All the usual business of royal life that would soon be redirected elsewhere. Catherine accepted the folder with a heavy heart, knowing that many of these worthy causes would lose their royal advocate. The evening meal with the children became a treasured moment of normalcy before everything changed. George shared stories from his history lesson, Charlotte described her art project, and Louis entertained everyone with his increasingly elaborate knock-knock jokes. Catherine and William participated fully in the conversation, storing these precious memories for the difficult days ahead. After the children were settled for the night, the final preparations began. The speech had been rehearsed, the logistics confirmed, and the security arrangements finalized. Communication teams stood ready to implement carefully crafted strategies designed to control the narrative and minimize negative speculation. Every contingency had been planned for, except the emotional toll that the announcement would take on their own hearts. As the clock approached the appointed hour, Catherine and William stood together in the same study where they had made their final decision. The portraits of previous monarchs seemed to watch them with expressions that ranged from understanding to disappointment. History would judge their choice, but tonight, they only cared about protecting what mattered most to them. The clock in the palace study struck 9 o'clock. marking the beginning of the most consequential hour in modern royal history. Catherine sat at the mahogany desk, her hands folded in her lap, while William stood behind her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. The speech lay before them, its carefully chosen words about to reshape their entire world. The television cameras had been discreetly positioned to capture what the production team believed was a routine address about upcoming charitable initiatives. The lighting was soft and warm, designed to convey approachability and sincerity. The palace staff buzzed with their usual efficiency, completely unaware that they were facilitating one of the most shocking announcements in royal history. Catherine's makeup artist applied final touches with practiced hands, commenting on how radiant the princess looked, despite the obvious tension in her shoulders. "You seem different tonight, Your Royal Highness," she observed with the familiarity of someone who had worked with Catherine for years. "There's something peaceful about your expression." "Perhaps it's clarity," Catherine replied softly, her eyes meeting her own reflection in the mirror. Sometimes the most difficult decisions bring the greatest sense of relief. The makeup artist nodded politely, assuming the comment referred to some minor royal duty rather than the earth-shattering choice about to be revealed. The final moments before filming began seemed to stretch endlessly. Catherine's fingers traced the edge of the speech, her eyes scanning the opening lines one last time. "After much reflection and careful consideration, Prince William and I have made the difficult decision to step back from our roles as senior working members of the royal family." The words that had seemed impossible to imagine months ago now felt like the only honest choice available to them. William squeezed her shoulder gently, a silent reminder that they were in this together, just as they had been through every challenge their marriage had faced. Their love story had begun at university, blossomed through years of courtship, and strengthened through the pressures of royal life. Now it would be tested by their decision to choose each other and their children over duty and tradition. The red recording light blinked on, and Catherine looked directly into the camera with the composure that had made her one of the most respected figures in the royal family. Her voice was steady and clear as she began to speak, each word carefully measured for maximum impact and minimal ambiguity. "Good evening. Prince William and I are speaking to you tonight to share news that will undoubtedly come as a surprise to many of you. After much reflection and careful consideration, we have made the difficult decision to step back from our roles as senior working members of the royal family, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, their impact reverberating through the silent studio and within hours around the world. Catherine continued with unwavering dignity, explaining their reasons with honesty that was both refreshing and heartbreaking. "This decision has not been made lightly. We have devoted over a decade to serving the crown and the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth with pride and dedication. However, we have come to realize that we can best serve our family and our values by choosing a different path forward." William moved into the camera frame, his presence providing visual support for their unified position. His expression was serious but calm, showing none of the internal struggle that had characterized the months leading up to this moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of conviction. "We want to be clear that this decision stems from our desire to provide our children with a childhood that allows them to develop their own identities away from the intense scrutiny that comes with our current roles. We believe this choice will ultimately strengthen the monarchy by allowing us to serve in ways that are more aligned with our personal values and family priorities." Catherine resumed speaking, addressing the concerns she knew would immediately arise about their financial independence and future relationship with the royal family. "We are committed to becoming financially independent and will continue to support charitable causes that are important to us. We will always honor the Queen's memory and maintain our deep respect for the institution of the monarchy." As the recording continued, Both Catherine and William seemed to visibly relax, as if the act of finally speaking their truth had lifted an enormous burden from their shoulders. They spoke about their gratitude for the support they had received from the public, their appreciation for the opportunities their royal roles had provided, and their hope for understanding during this transition. The final segment of their address focused on their vision for the future. Catherine spoke about their plan to establish a foundation focused on youth mental health and educational opportunities, while William discussed their commitment to conservation efforts and sustainable development projects. Their passion for these causes was evident, suggesting that stepping back from royal duties might actually amplify their impact in areas they cared most deeply about. "We ask for your patience and understanding as we navigate this transition," Catherine concluded, her voice filled with emotion for the first time during the recording. "We are not abandoning our commitment to service. We are simply choosing to serve in a way that allows us to be the parents and partners we want to be." The recording ended, and the studio fell into stunned silence. The production crew exchanged bewildered glances, uncertain whether they had just witnessed history or participated in an elaborate hoax. The palace communications team immediately sprang into action, preparing for the media storm that would begin within minutes of the broadcast. Catherine and William remained seated for several moments after the cameras stopped rolling, both of them processing what they had just done. The relief was palpable, mixed with anticipation and concern about the reaction their announcement would generate. They had crossed a line from which there could be no return, but for the first time in months, they felt completely at peace with their choice. The immediate aftermath was controlled chaos. Phone calls flooded in from family members, government officials, and media outlets around the world. The palace switchboard was overwhelmed with calls from journalists seeking additional information or confirmation of what seemed impossible to believe. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from shock and disappointment to support and admiration for their courage. Catherine's mother called within 20 minutes of the broadcast, her voice a mixture of concern and pride. "Darling, are you absolutely certain about this?" she asked. "The backlash is going to be enormous." "We've never been more certain about anything in our lives," Catherine replied, feeling stronger and more confident with each passing moment. "This is about protecting what matters most to us, while still being able to make a difference in the world." Meanwhile, William fielded a difficult conversation with his father, whose reaction was predictably complex. King Charles expressed disappointment and concern about the impact on the monarchy, but also acknowledged his understanding of their desire to prioritize their family's well-being. The conversation was tense, but ultimately respectful, ending with a promise to work together to ensure a smooth transition. The children mercifully slept through the initial chaos, their innocence preserved for one more night before their world would be forever changed. Catherine and William took turns checking on them, both parents overwhelmed by love and determination to protect these precious lives from the storm that was brewing outside their bedroom doors. As the night progressed, public reaction began to crystallize into distinct camps. Supporters praised their authenticity and courage, viewing their decision as a modernization of the monarchy that prioritized mental health and family values. Critics condemned their choice as selfish abandonment of duty, arguing that they had accepted the privileges of royal life without fulfilling their obligations. The international media response was swift and intense. Television networks interrupted regular programming to discuss the implications of their announcement. Royal experts and constitutional scholars were summoned to provide analysis and context for what many described as the most significant royal crisis since the abdication of King Edward VIII in 1936. Catherine found herself surprisingly calm as she watched the coverage, feeling detached from the speculation and criticism. The decision was made, the announcement was public, and their new life could finally begin. William sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them finding strength in their unity and shared vision for the future. Their legal team worked through the night to finalize arrangements that had been months in preparation. Security details were adjusted, financial agreements were implemented, and official duties were formally transferred to other working royals. Every detail had been anticipated and planned for, ensuring that their departure would cause minimal disruption to ongoing royal commitments. As dawn approached, Catherine and William walked through their private quarters one final time as senior working royals. The rooms that had been their home for over a decade would soon be reassigned, their personal belongings packed and moved to a private residence where they could begin building their new life away from the spotlight. The children woke to find their parents calmer and more present than they had been in months, though they didn't yet understand why. George noticed that his mother seemed different during breakfast, her smiles more genuine and her attention more focused. Charlotte commented that Daddy looked less worried than usual, while Louis simply enjoyed having both parents fully engaged in his storytelling about imaginary adventures. The official announcement of their decision would be released to the press later that morning, followed by a series of carefully orchestrated interviews and statements designed to explain their choice and address public concerns. But for now, in the quiet moments of early morning with their children happily eating breakfast and planning their day, Catherine and William felt the profound peace that comes from finally living authentically. Their silent, heartfelt farewell to royal life had been completed, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. History would remember this moment as unprecedented, controversial, and deeply personal. But for Catherine and William, it would forever be remembered as the day they chose love, family, and truth over tradition, duty, and public expectation. In doing so, they had etched themselves into royal history not as defectors, but as a couple brave enough to redefine what it means to serve both crown and conscience in the modern world.